It's LSU Bama game week. Arthur, what has 200,000 eyeballs, 17 teeth, and 1 strand of DNA? That's right. It's Alabama's Bryant-Denny Stadium on a fall Saturday. We've got an LSU Bama game preview and a whole lot more on our biggest show yet. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and this here is some Bayou football. Sup? Welcome all to episode 8 of the Bayou Football video podcast. I am Ruddy Rutledge, and he is the main character, Arthur the Bayou Party Dog. Well, it's LSU and Alabama. What else do I need to say? As usual, the stakes are high for this one, but this year it's a little bit different than previous years. Used to be, this one had huge implications on the SEC West divisional race. Over the past 15 to 20 years or so, the winner of this game outright decided the winner of the division. But this year, with no more divisions, and with a 12-team playoff, and with LSU and Alabama both coming in with 2 losses, this one has become a de facto college football playoff elimination game on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. The winner will still need to win out, but the loser, well, probably needs to accept the fact that its season is over around 10 o'clock or so in Baton Rouge on Saturday night. Both teams are coming off open dates last weekend, but the last time they played, the Tide rebounded from a loss to Tennessee with a blowout domination over a pretty good Missouri team. Meanwhile, LSU, in its last game, pooped its pants in the second half in an awful loss on the road to Texas A&M. Now, Bama, of course, caught hell for the first game it lost this season, which was a shocking loss on the road at Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt. But Vandy has since proven to be a pretty good football team, better than the USC team that beat LSU in the season opener. And I think this Crimson Tide squad is a lot better than some of these wishful thinking LSU fans are giving them credit for. Athletically, Alabama, like Ole Miss, is a more talented team top to bottom than LSU, and that's not debatable. The Tigers have some Jimmies and Joes too, but there are keys that need to be turned if this LSU team is going to have a chance on Saturday night. First up is the Garrett Nussmeier dynamic. On offense, the Tiger quarterback is the key, literally. He's everything. And there's no reason to complicate things as far as that goes. He absolutely was a big reason for LSU's second half implosion against Texas A&M. And he needs to turn the page on that performance because he was also a big reason for LSU's win against Ole Miss earlier this season. Nussmeier has to play within himself and what the play calls for as far as his reads go, and he can't try to force the big play over and over like he did against the Aggies. And it's on him to play well and carry this offense because, as we know, as we've come to find out over the course of the season, LSU cannot run the football. They can't do it. The Tiger offensive line excels in pass pro. They can pass block. But they do not have the ability to line up and move people off the line of scrimmage and open up running lanes. It's just not there. Now, offensive coordinator Joe Sloan needs to stop wasting so many plays trying to establish that running game. We've reached the point in the season where you need to do what you do well in order to win games. It's survive and advance at this point for LSU. Now, LSU's lost one of its better linemen in guard Garrett Dellinger, who's been ruled out for the game. But, we've reached that point in the season where you need to do what you do best. And, of course, LSU needs to run the ball some. I'm not advocating for the adoption of some Mike Leach air raid offense. But all this automatic running plays every second and long, that's nonsense. It's got to stop. No, LSU is a passing team. And if they're going to beat Bama, Nussmeier has to sit back in the pocket, be patient, make his reads, and put the ball exactly where it needs to be. And he's got to do it time and time and time again. And he's got to tuck it and run when there's nothing but grass in front of him. Don't be afraid to just tuck that ball and run, Nuss. It's not like he's slow. He's not a running quarterback, but if that's there, then he's going to have to take it. And most importantly, Nussmeier needs to lead. He needs to lead this football team. He's done a good job of that so far, but he needs to do it in a big way Saturday night. Defense. The Tide, to the surprise of no one, have a lot of offensive weapons, and none of those are more terrifying on tape anyway than freshman wide receiver Ryan Williams. But I think the key to this, for this LSU defense on Saturday, is going to be its ability to contain Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe on the ground, running the ball. He'll get his through the air to a certain degree, but he's not a great passer, and he relies on his legs an awful lot. And LSU, of all teams, can attest to this fact after last season when then defensive coordinator, Matt House, I said two dirty words right there, absolutely refused to put a spy on Milroe, who proceeded to score 4 times, 4 touchdowns, all rushing on the ground against the Tigers as the Tide blew past LSU in the fourth quarter of that game last season in Tuscaloosa. Don't be stubborn, coaches. Brian Kelly, Blake Baker, defensive coordinator. Kelly himself, after last season's loss to Bama, on the Monday after the game, admitted, yeah, we should have spied Milroe. Don't create a situation where you have to come back to the podium this Monday and say the exact same thing, coach. Take away what Milroe does best. Don't let him do what he does best. Make him beat you with his arm. Stop him from doing what he does best first, and then worry about the other. I also want to take a second here to acknowledge LSU's home field advantage. And as we saw 2 years ago, when LSU beat Bama in that thrilling overtime game, the Tiger Stadium, Death Valley mystique is still very much a real thing. And it's going to play a part Saturday night in this game. You're going to get Saturday night in Death Valley, full tilt, full throttle, in all its glory. And like everyone else, I'm also hoping that this incoming tropical storm does not affect this game, specifically the LSU passing game, because I've got the Tigers in another Death Valley thriller, LSU 34, Bama 31. Now, one name I did not mention in that game preview was that of Nick Saban. And that name is significant because this Saturday, for the first time in 19 consecutive meetings between LSU and Alabama, Saban will not be prowling the Bama sideline. And for just the third time in the last 24 meetings between these two schools, he won't be roaming a sideline for either one of these two teams. But he will be there. But more on that in a second. Saban coached Bama from 2007 through 2023, and he coached LSU from 2000 to 2004. And after announcing his retirement this offseason, he was quickly snatched up by ESPN's College Game Day program, where he has brought new life to what was, frankly, a dying, boring show. His chemistry with co-host Pat McAfee, former NFL punter and part-time professional wrestler, has made Game Day watchable again. And the Game Day crew will be on campus at LSU this Saturday morning for the first time since 2019. I, for one, am ready to see Saban out there in the quad with his little laptop, using his hands, giving his little takes. Well, LSU has always shown a propensity, right, to use that crowd to help them win football games, right? Meanwhile, McAfee responds by jumping up on top of the desk and delivering a WWE-style promo at the top of his lungs. The Tigers are gonna drop the hammer down on the Todd. Okay, I mean, I like McAfee, but I can see how he's not exactly everybody's cup of tea. And of course, when it's time for Saban to make his pick, everybody there is going to be wondering which way he's going to lean, including the host of the show, prominent Gump media nerd and longtime LSU hater, Reese Davis. But even if Saban picks the Gumps to win, and this is just how I feel about this is LSU's chance to show Saban some appreciation for what he did here. Yes, you heard that correctly. I think LSU fans should give him some cheers. Show him some love. Yes, he left us for the NFL. Yes, he came back to the SEC and built the greatest dynasty the sport has ever seen at Alabama and cost LSU at least one national championship, probably more in the process. But before Saban came to LSU, the Tigers were pretenders, at least on the national stage. Sure, the school had won numerous SEC titles, and they won a national championship way back in 1958. But when he got here, the LSU program was not the name brand it is today. He came here in 2000 and changed three key aspects of this program. Number one, recruiting. He got the dudes here for the first time in a long time. He's the coach that did it. You got to have the dudes if you want to compete. It's just as simple as that. Number two, facilities. He immediately saw that LSU could not compete with the biggest powers in the conference at the time, Florida and Tennessee, without a complete overhaul of the facilities available to the players on campus. The big Sabanland football complex and the Academic Center for Athletes that are still in use today, they're here because of him, literally. And number three, he changed the culture. He made the entire LSU community believe they were a championship program before they even were. He cultivated an atmosphere where the senior leaders, the veteran leaders on the team, passed on to the younger players exactly what was expected of them, what was demanded of them. And he delivered to LSU the school's first national title in 45 years. And then he did something I wished he had never done. He left. He went to the NFL, stayed just 2 years in Miami with the Dolphins, and then he went to Tuscaloosa, and we've hated him ever since. Until now. He can't hurt us anymore, balls. He can't hurt us anymore. So, about that game day pick. Does Saban continue his weekly practice of picking Alabama, his most recent and longest tenured head coaching job, where he won 6 national titles, where he has an office inside the stadium today, where they've named the field after him, where he has a 9-foot-tall statue of himself outside the stadium? Or does he spurn the Gumps and go with his first love, the place where he won his first national championship? By picking the Tigers, Saban can cause that LSU game day crowd to absolutely erupt in a way that McAfee will never be able to. You can say, who cares? It doesn't matter. And I mean, no, it doesn't really matter. But games like this are what make college football fun. Games like this are the reason the younger fans, the students, show up and get so into shows like Game Day. Games like this are a big reason I'm doing this show today. So it's going to be a big moment, a fun moment, and I'm ready for it. For this segment, Arthur's taking his usual beer break, where he indulges in room temperature light beer. I think he just doesn't want to listen to me rant and rave about the Saints. And about those lovable New Orleans Saints. They officially hit rock bottom last Sunday as they dropped a game to the lowly Carolina Panthers in another horrendous display of professional football. And then they fired head coach Dennis Allen first thing Monday morning. And, of course, that was met with lots of reaction from the Houdat Nation. Lots of takes, a lot of opinions. For me, after I saw the news of the firing, I immediately began to put together my 2 cents worth for this show today. I began planning to tell you why they did what they did, why they fired him, when they fired him. I was thinking initially they fired him because it was just the easy way, the easiest route to take at that given moment in time. Monday, November the 4th, 2024 at 7 o'clock in the morning or whenever it was. I was going to say the easy way is the only way this franchise operates. I'm talking about the ownership level with Gail Benson, the general managerial level, Mickey Loomis, and presidential level, Dennis Lauscha. I was going to tell you that by keeping Allen for the remainder of the season, this front office triumvirate would have had to deal with not only intense fan criticism, booing at the games, but player insubordination, possibly a player revolt in the locker room, closest thing to it at this level anyway. And so they made things easier on themselves and went ahead and pulled the trigger. Now, before I go further, it's important to note that after their latest abortion of a game on Sunday, Saints players expressed frustration, and hinting at that frustration was with their head coach. Now, that's definitely uncharted territory. I know that. Cryptic comments, cryptic social media posts after the game, X video surfacing of Cam Jordan having to be coaxed back into the locker room by Derek Carr after the game. So the hints at player backlash were already bubbling up on Sunday, and this front office has a track record of not wanting anything to do with disgruntled, malcontent players in the locker room. Remember C.J. Gardner-Johnson? C.D. Deuce forced a trade and got what he wanted because the squeaky wheel always gets the grease with this front office. Unless, of course, you burn bridges with them like Michael Thomas burns bridges. And Michael Thomas burns bridges like Hitler burned books. So anyway, I was thinking they had just fired DA because it was the easiest way to deal with the backlash from the fans and the players, because the easiest way has been the status quo in New Orleans for quite some time. But it seems a corner may have finally been turned by team ownership. Nick Underhill of New Orleans.Football, hat tip to you, sir, as well as others, have indicated that Gail Benson, team owner Gail Benson, was the driving force behind the firing. And there are other reports suggesting Loomis was against the firing. Well, what do you know? Gail, who's always been very hands-off with regard to football matters, and that's not a bad thing, reportedly met with multiple players before the Carolina game and asked them what they thought of Allen and his coaching. Now, for a while, it has been my strong belief that Dennis Allen lost these players' respect as their head coach after he apologized for running up the score on the Falcons at the end of the season last year, which he didn't even do. He instructed the players not to score that final touchdown. They did it anyway, and then he apologized for it to the Falcons. Cam hinted that the players didn't like that very much, and I thought Dennis Allen should have been fired then, immediately. But of course he wasn't. So now I'm thinking maybe Gail has turned the corner and become a real NFL owner. She did something legitimate business owners do. She talked to her employees, her players. She asked them questions. She waited another game before acting. She watched the product on the field one more time as it continued to deteriorate. And then she made a decision that apparently her GM, Loomis, was against. I don't think this was an easy thing for Gail at all. It's the first time she's done anything like this since she's been team owner. And I don't think she was taking the easy route. I don't think she was just trying to appease the fans. I think she did it because it was the right thing to do. The man deserved to be fired. He deserved to be fired. He is a gigantic loser as a head coach. He's clearly not cut out for it. And she wasn't going to let Loomis continue to prop Allen up every week as the losses continued to mount. But make no mistake, taking the easy route is why this franchise is in salary cap hell. They just kick that rebuild can down the road every year because it's easier. Taking the easy route is why Dennis Allen got hired in the first place. When Sean Payton dipped out, they didn't want to do their homework on other candidates. They didn't want to do their due diligence by vetting and evaluating other assistant coaches from around the league and coaches from the college ranks. No, that'd be too hard, too much work. So Loomis hired from within, even though we all knew from his time in Oakland that DA was a lousy head coach. The hire was basically packaged as, or framed as, keeping the Sean Payton system in place, which is, of course, the only winning season we've ever known here. And Gail was presumably persuaded to go along with it. Probably wasn't very hard to do at the time. But now, seems like things may be different now. Maybe this firing will energize Gail Benson, empower her, motivate her to hold even more folks, Mickey Loomis, accountable at the end of the season. Welcome back, Arthur. For our final segment, we're going to take a look at the LSU-Alabama series history, but not in the way you're most likely thinking. If you know an Alabama football fan, or if you're friends with any Tide fans, then you already know the Crimson Tide, the mighty, mighty Crimson Tide, have never, ever, ever lost a football game. Not to another team, at least. You see, they only beat themselves. Bama doesn't lose to other teams. It's true. Just listen to the Paul Feinbaum show, and you'll know exactly what I mean. I can hear the call-ins to that show echoing through my head as we speak. I'm telling you, Paul, the dynasty ain't over, Paul. Vanderbilt didn't beat Bama. We beat ourselves. Bama beat themselves. Too many mistakes. And I tell you what's wrong with this coach DeBoer. He's making them boys do too much learning in the schoolhouse during the week. Not focused on football, Paul. And then they turn around and beat themselves on Saturday night. I have to say that's correct. The Tide don't get beat by other schools. They've even beaten themselves decisively at times, blown themselves out by multiple scores. And sometimes the LSU Tigers have been fortunate enough to be standing there on the field across from the Tide as they beat themselves, and were thereby able to claim a lucky, lucky, lucky victory. Joking aside, that's what we're going to go over right now. 5 times the LSU Tigers smacked the Alabama Crimson Tide in the mouth. These weren't close games. These weren't nail biters. Just good old-fashioned butt whippings where Tiger fans ended up throwing fourth quarter parties in the stands like only Tiger fans can. First up, 1957. LSU 28, Alabama nothing. Billy Cannon and the Tigers were a year away from their national championship run. But they were still able to lay the wood to the Crimson Tide in Tiger Stadium in front of 33,000 in a much smaller version of Death Valley than the gigantic colossus we see rising up from the banks of the Mississippi River today. Next one, 1982. Just before Bear Bryant retired, he got drubbed in Birmingham 20-10 by the Tigers in a game that wasn't as close as that score sounds. Rumor has it, the old Bear stumbled into the LSU locker room after the game and congratulated the Tigers and said to them, quote, "You Bayou balls just made my old drunk ass quit." Or something like that. I don't know. Next up, we have the 1997 game where Kevin Falk and the Tigers invaded Tuscaloosa and shut out the Tide for the first time since that 1957 game. Falk ran all over Bama for 179 yards, and the Tigers dumped the Gumps 27-0. 4 years later, 2001, a Nick Saban-led LSU squad marched into Bryant-Denny Stadium and lit up Tuscaloosa like a pinball machine in a 35-21 Tiger victory. Records were broken that day by LSU's prolific offense. First, you had Rohan Davey, quarterback, who put up an LSU record 528 passing yards. And wideout Josh Reed smashed the SEC single-game receiving yard record with 293 receiving yards. And he also broke the single-game receptions record with 19 catches. And just 2 years after that, our final Bama beatdown occurred in the same setting, Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. That's where they have the 17 teeth total and the one single strand of DNA. And Saban's Tigers again routed the Gumps 27-3, and LSU went on to win the 2003 national championship. After that game, 'tis said, Bama fans aimlessly wandered the streets of Tuscaloosa trying to figure out how they beat themselves so decisively yet again. Now, if there are any Bama fans watching this, lighten up. It's all in good fun. Don't be sensitive. I actually have friends who are Tide fans. One of them just informed me of some very, very exciting news he just received. And I'm genuinely happy for my buddy and his entire family because he just found out that his sister's pregnant. Yep. And I just know he's going to make a fantastic father. You know what they say, those Bama folks, they put the kin in kinky. For Arthur, the Bayou Party Dog, I'm Ruddy Rutledge. He is a real good boy, and this is some Bayou football.